Good morning. Hope you had a good week. I'm glad you're here this morning. Let's pray together. Oh Lord our God, how majestic is your name in all the earth. We praise you, we delight in you, and we're so thankful that you love us. Lord, thank you for the way you continue to bless this church. Thank you for those who minister among us. Please bless Matt and his family, Mac and his family, and Braden. Bless the work they do with us. Please bless the elders and the deacons, and please bless all of us. Thank you for the servant hearts in this room, for people who enthusiastically jump up to do the things that need to be done for one another and in this community. We thank you for Jesus, for the example he showed us of the way to treat others and to the way he modeled life. Thank you for his sacrifice for us, for your mercy and forgiveness and grace. It's in his name. Amen. Our citizenship is in heaven, and that's kind of what we're focused on. And I'm going to get you started early with the song. And I want to compliment you because I could hear you last week from the pulpit. I'm pretty sure I heard some of you, and I appreciate that so much because, nobody else in the auditorium, 200 plus people, had ever heard this before. And oh, did they do? Okay. Good deal. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own treasured possession, called out of darkness to marvelous light. You were not a kindred people, now you are a family. You had not received God's mercy, now his grace has set you free. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own treasured possession, called out of darkness to marvelous light. Great. You know who wrote the lyrics? Who can tell me who wrote the lyrics to that song? Peter, the Apostle Peter, yeah. And if you've never been able to memorize a verse of Scripture in your whole life, you've got two now. If you can remember that, when those words run through your head, you have two verses memorized. I don't want to keep going back to what we talked about last week and 2 weeks ago and things like that, but this did occur to me from Psalm 137. And it occurred to me because, do y'all have earworms? Do y'all know what that is? A song that just keeps going through your head, and all day long it keeps going through your head. Well, of course, when you're as old as some of us are, there are lots and lots of possibilities for earworms, right? And mine went back to when I was 17, and my Christmas present that year was an 8-track tape player with a handle on it, so I could carry it around. It sat in my bedroom, and I had, I think, 3 8-track tapes. And one of them was a guy named Don McLean. Anybody know who that was? American Pie is probably his biggest hit. You know what his second biggest hit was? Vincent. Now, most of us don't know that song by that name. What do we know it by, Leo? That is the name of the song officially. Okay. You had the album too? Okay.
I have 3 short classics. Big LP.
So you may know where I'm going with this. But y'all have heard Starry, Starry Night, paint your palace blue and gray. That's Vincent, okay? Most people think it's called Starry, Starry Night. But there was a song on that album called By the Waters of Babylon. Do you remember that one? Was it on yours? Well, every now and then, that just goes through my head. Like, go ahead, Dave.
My first thought was a song, Love Lifted Me because of Jesus.
Okay. Yeah.
That comes to my heart and mind pretty regularly.
Do you think God understands humanity well enough to know that the things we put to music become a part of us? And I know people who say, I don't sing. And I'm thinking part of your soul is missing a chunk of what God intended for it to have. Part of your soul is missing what God meant to help power you through life.
Part of my deal too is because the way Jesus come to me, I thought I got saved at 12 years old, and I didn't. And Jesus come to me in that big truck.
Mm-hmm.
That
When you were 38.
38.
Yep.
And he says, I died for your sins. And that has not left me. Every time I think about salvation, I think about, that he died for me.
Mm-hmm.
And because I went through all them years since I was 12 years old thinking I was saved and wasn't. And that was a big factor to me, and it was because Jesus had died for me.
Thank you, David. But if you read the first 6 verses of Psalm 137, by the waters of Babylon, we sat down and wept. Is it okay to mourn for things that are lost? Do you think? Here we have an inspired psalm writer who, inspired by God to show us how to pray and to sing to God, and he's saying, we sat down and wept. And what are they mourning? If they're by the waters of Babylon, who are these people who are mourning? Israelites. They're in exile, right? They've been taken from Jerusalem and Judah to Babylon. So when the Babylonians make fun of them, our gods are better than your God. We won. Our gods beat your God, this one you're so high on. They're insulting him constantly. Sing some of those songs about how great your God is and how superior your God is to ours. And they're taunting him. And their response is they're mourning that they've lost this, that our God is better than your God and all of your gods. The only problem is that mourning what we've lost cannot become our God. What we used to do can't be what we worship. I was trying to think, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and the reason I brought this up, we talked a couple of weeks ago about things we used to do in our churches that we don't do anymore, or that we miss. And I was trying to think Johnny brought up the fact maybe we should celebrate the things that we do differently that are better. And I was trying to think, what do I miss about the old days that I wish we could incorporate now? And I was really having a hard time. When I think about the fact that in the biggest church I ever belonged to in Pasadena, Texas, 400 or 500 members, there was on Sunday evening before church, we had church at 6 and we had singing at 5 in a room maybe the size of this row of seats to the back. And I learned how to sing parts. And I miss the fact that we did that and kind of emphasized that. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, is that how God needs us to be servants? And I'm thinking it was a great thing for me in my development as a musician, and in my enthusiasm for praising God in song. Okay? It had a lot to do with that. But I also wonder if sometimes, if I think that's so important that I neglect things that maybe are more important. So, I'm not saying that if we did that, it would be wrong. I'm just saying my personal feelings about, we should be doing this. Maybe I need to rethink that, because I can see where a whole lot of people maybe think there's other things I should be doing that are more important than that. Okay. Anybody want to comment on that? Dave?
You know, it's each to his own. You more of a singer than
No, I'm not a singer. I'm not a singer.
you lead singing,
I will do that, yes.
but you more of a singer than me. Anyhow, and I can understand you thinking about singing different songs. My thoughts goes back to the old days. I'm glad that I don't smoke anymore and I don't drink my booze anymore, and my mind goes back to that. Just being glad, you know, that I don't.
Mickey, also, I think, like, as Israel lamented there on the rivers of Babylon, and I think something that would make their laments sharper was when the realization came that it is their fault.
Yeah.
They were there. We turned away from God. This
Right.
is our punishment. And all that's revealed when you read what Daniel said.
Yes.
As he was reading from the prophet Jeremiah, who was one of the main ones who stood there and reminded them
Yep.
of why they were there.
Absolutely.
Well, at least until they left, because he was never there.
Yep.
But others were, And that always makes it worse. It's when you're suffering, like Scripture says, if you suffer, don't suffer for doing wrong.
Right.
If you're suffering for doing the right thing, you can deal with that.
Yes.
It's just much worse when you realize that I'm suffering because of my shortcomings.
I'm suffering. I am the cause of my suffering. Yes. Absolutely. Let's go on to 1 Peter 2, which is where the song came from. And these are the verses after the ones we just sang, 11 through 13. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles, and that's a different translation from others say aliens and strangers. We're going to talk a lot about being aliens and strangers and foreigners and exiles. It's ways to say the same thing, but they all have different connotations for us in English, so I wanted to make sure we got all four of those words in. Abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. How many of you been to a foreign country? A foreign country, another country. One, not America. You have been. Okay, so I want you to think back on that experience. Did you feel alien? Now, if you just went to Canada, that might not be real different. But did you feel alien while you were there? Did you feel lost sometimes?
Especially in Vietnam.
I bet, Vietnam. Especially when a lot of the people there wanted to kill you. I remember being in Venice with Robin, and I had been married for 3 years and had both quit our jobs and gone to Europe, which is not something I highly recommend. we were in Venice and we were supposed to go catch the bus. We didn't know where we were or how to get back there. Venice is pretty large, and it's not like street names posted everywhere or even street names you would recognize anyway. Just how alien it felt and like we were on another planet. But I want to ask you, did you have assumptions or expectations while you were there that you got growing up about how things are going to be or how things should be that turned out to be completely irrelevant there? Nobody wants to share? I went to Kenya when I was in my early 40s with my brother, Monty, because he had been, 10 years before, he had been a missionary in Kenya with one specific tribe. And I know probably the picture you get, your mental image of African tribes probably comes from National Geographic when you were kids. Wasn't like that at all, you know. They weren't wearing coats and ties, but they wore a shirt like me, and they wore pants like me, and shoes like mine. And some of them, you know, their clothes were more expensive than mine, because in my early 40s, we didn't have a lot. But he had been a missionary to a tribe called Kalenjin of about 1 million people. Now, you're thinking, you know, when you first think of African tribes, you're thinking tribal village, you know, maybe 60 people would be a big one. 1 million people. They all spoke a language called Kalenjin, and that was pretty much the unifying thing. Of course, they all had a common ancestry. And when we went through the pictures of dress, you know, people in their native dress, was that last week? I showed you a picture of a tribe from Kenya. They were called the Maasai, and they're still a little more primitive, but the Kalenjin were kind of modern. But I just remember how many things, you know, I'd been to foreign countries before Africa, before Kenya, but how many things, okay, I need to go to the store and stock up. Can't just do that. Can't go to the grocery store and stock up. Plus, as I was walking into town, you know, nobody looks like me. And my brother had told me, if somebody stops you and talks to you, just remember you're Canadian. Because Americans are not particularly popular internationally in a lot of places. Did you know that? So nobody stopped me. Nobody asked me. So I didn't have to lie. Thank goodness. Things like paved roads. Things like bridges over rivers that you just assume are going to be there. Have you ever gotten in the car and gone somewhere and even thought about which rivers I'm going to have to cross to do this and how much hardships that's going to create? How am I going to get over that river? Do you ever think about that when you go somewhere? Or even a creek? So, tell me about your alien experiences. David?
Well, I've seen people believing in different gods, and that was amazing to me. You know, even back then, you know, once I got saved, Jesus made the picture come back to me. Real good, you know, and all these people that I associated with believed in different gods.
Mm-hmm.
And that was amazing to me.
And in Vietnam, there was ancestor worship and things like that too, right? Where your grandfather who died 40 years ago, you pray to him because he will bless you. He can help you. That would feel odd to us. Carol?
Well, one thing is here in America have, not necessarily in the store, even if you could afford it.
Well, Monty and I went to the Hard Rock Cafe in Nairobi, Kenya. Hard Rock Cafe, can you believe that? It's the only Hard Rock Cafe I'd ever been in. I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about them. So have y'all been to one? Well, this was a new thing to me, and I didn't know what to expect. And I'm sure the one in Nairobi is different from the one in Memphis, or are there any? There aren't any around here, are there?
There's one in Dallas.
Dallas, okay. But I remember looking at the menu and thinking, wow, a hamburger costs like 1,200 shillings. And that's kind of a sticker shock, about $7. and that's just one example of things you have to. Also, we're hiking up a jungle mountain to go to one village, and I really need to go to the bathroom. Well, what do you do in America? Pull into a McDonald's or a gas station? Well, there's not a road. There aren't any of those kind of establishments. You step off the path and into the jungle. That took some adjustment for me. that was alien and foreign to me. Yes, ma'am.
Our first experience with a roundabout was in Germany. Now we love, I know a lot of people don't, and you talk about the food, even the big grocery stores, they have fresh meat hanging, and it's first come, first served. It's gone. It's gone. You get no meat. And their cereals, they're right, there's no dyes in them. They're colorless.
Yeah.
So that's kind of strange. And we found out
That's a big political issue these days.
they pretty much put liquor in everything. We could not buy a box of candy because we couldn't read it, and we'd bite in it, and we knew it had liquor in it. So we
This was in Germany?
Germany. And we couldn't believe how young you could be to smoke and drink.
Yeah.
I was shocked at 10-year-olds standing outside smoking. They are very addicted to smoking.
Oh,
So it was a big culture shock.
We spent about a week in Germany back in 1982. And it was amazing to us that we could see cultural differences between northern Germany and southern Germany.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were even obvious to us.
Yeah. When we went to Paris, you could go to the bathroom anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
we took a bus trip, and it was a potty break, and everybody started going to the bathroom, and we thought, I think I can hold mine. It was shocking.
I do remember a village in France where they were just right out in the middle of the main street. There were just a bunch of holes in the pavement. We thought, what is this? Well, it was where everybody went to the bathroom. No dividers, no walls. Just
We felt pretty comfortable in England. They spoke English, and they were pretty good people. But the rest of the places we've traveled through the years were shocking.
You talk about roundabouts. Have you been to the big one in Paris? It's like 30 lanes.
Yes.
We were on a bus and we thought we're never getting through here. And the Parisians are going 80 miles an hour.
I don't think they have traffic laws either.
No, I don't either.
You just get on and go.
So we have expectations for how things are going to be. And many of us grew up with expectations because our culture was a whole lot closer to what we believe than maybe it is now. Sinful desires. Since World War II in our culture, we've been more and more obsessed and inclined to talk about and emphasize sinful desires that were sexual sins. I can't tell you why that is. I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, but I wonder, looking at my own personal life, I don't think a whole lot about gluttony, which obviously I should, right? I do think about gossip because I've been made conscious of it a lot, and think, I've heard this, I'm not going to repeat it. I think we excuse greed because it's everybody's God. It's a common God in our culture. Having more is important to way too many of us. Envy. I still feel a little envy toward people sometimes. It's not very strong. There are things, there are qualities of people that I wish I was more like that. Do you see that in people? I wish I could do that. I wish I could think this way. I think those people are put in my path, so I'll try to get there. But I want us to look at a list of sexual sins written by Paul, and you're not as familiar with these verses because we really talk a lot about the fruit of the Spirit in churches, right? These are the list of sins before the list of fruits of the Spirit, fruit of the Spirit. This is Galatians 5:19 through 21, if you're checking up on me. The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery. Oh, and I want you to count the number of these that you think are sexual sins, okay, out of this list. Idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. How many of those are sexual sins, would you guess?
All of the above.
You think?
Yeah. You can apply sexual immorality to any of those items.
I think you're right. But if we were going to categorize, you're right, Leo. And you really threw me off because I wasn't expecting that response. But I think you were right. But how many of those just immediately jump out as sexual sins?
3.
Okay. What's anybody else's count? 7? 10. Wow. 8 or 10. Okay, the winners. No. I would have said explicitly sexual 3 or 4. But that was how I was thinking until Leo threw a monkey wrench in my brain. We were interviewing youth ministers a couple of years ago to replace Caleb. Those of you who remember Caleb. That was a hard thing. Caleb was the 4th of 4 superstar youth ministers. I bet there's not a church this size in the history of the world that had youth ministers as high caliber as we had right in a row. Starting with Max Sandlin, Matt Love, Logan Thompson, some of you remember him, Caleb Carney, youth ministers and their wives who were just spectacular in their jobs and in the relationships they developed with students and the depth of their thinking and feeling about serving the students, the teenagers. They were irreplaceable. And each time we lost one, we were thinking, we'll never find anybody that can do this job like that guy did and his wife. I think when we hired Matt, he wasn't married yet. So, but he was engaged, and he and Maddie got married while he was the youth minister. So when we started to interview people to replace Caleb, because he was moving back to Tennessee to be closer to his family, it was really hard. But you know what? We visited with parents. What do you want us to look for in a youth minister? You know what was number 1? And it's made a big impression on me because up until we had that big discussion, I would have agreed this was probably the most important thing. Y'all don't know? None of you were part of those discussions, were you? Yeah, you don't have kids that age. It was, how do they stand on homosexuality and transgender? That was number one, the biggest priority. And we interviewed a couple of guys that might have been really good dealing with the students, but they wouldn't say, this is wrong, and I condemn it. They wouldn't say that. We asked the questions differently when we started looking for somebody this time, fortunately. And, we found somebody who believes like we believe about things like that. And so we knew people would be happy with that, but we also decided we needed to go for those, maybe some other qualities that they could connect with students and that they were really deep into their belief was strong. And anyway, it seems like our greatest fear was of cultural shifts in sexual morality. That's our greatest fear. And I get this mental image of us and the church cowering, going, they're piling this on us. They're going to beat us down. But when Jesus talks about the kingdom of God, the kingdom of Satan, he talks about the kingdom of Satan's gates, the gates of hell. That's defensive. We're the offense. We're not defense, we're offense. Now, what does that look like? And we're going to get into that. I don't want you to get too far ahead of me. But I don't think that's an irrational fear for us, okay? I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's insane. I think maybe we're maybe too distracted by that. Because Satan, while he's doing this in front of you, here's homosexuality, here's transgenderism, here's all this stuff. What's he sneaking in the back door that we're not thinking about? And we don't resist because we're so focused on one thing, like a magician. What's in my hand? Look over here. What I think of things in America that we just naturally, that Americans idolize: money, power, materialism, how much stuff we're collecting. I think about things like sorcery, which is on this list. Wait, is it on there? Yeah. Sorcery, things like people who will talk about, people in the church who will talk about your astrological sign. When I was a teenager, sometimes we'd have little church parties and do the Ouija board. You ever had a magic 8-ball? Yeah, Wendell.
When you're talking about material things, we need to understand he who has much is required. Mm-hmm. And it's not only money as such, but talent-wise, whatever. Much is required. If you've got it, much is required.
Mm-hmm. And that's not just money, is what your point is. Yeah, anything. I agree 100%. If we're going to go on with 1 Peter, this is 2 verse 12. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Do people who believe what we believe, are there people now accusing us of being immoral? In our culture? Are they? Are you transphobic? Now, they use the words in ways that I think are just false. I'm not afraid of trans people. Do I think they're doing the right thing? No. But I'm not afraid. Am I homophobic? No. Am I Islamophobic? No. But that's what we're accused of, right? Because are we against the rights of identity groups? Well, I'm not, except that I think their rights should be the same rights I have. And as far as politics goes in America, this is not the things about Christianity. But I want to ask you, what good deeds do you think the pagans see us doing?
The Bible makes it clear that the one that you're supposed to see us doing is love one another. Love and kindred.
But do they come in here and see that happening? The first part of that question is, do they come in here? No. So this can't be the only place this happens, right? And you're right, Carol. They should see the love we have for one another. Absolutely. Where would they see it? I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. And I really do want you to answer because I'm trying to figure it out too. They should see it every day. But do they see, they don't see me interacting with y'all.
No, but we should love everyone
Yes.
and treat them as we would like to be treated. Just follow what the Lord would have done.
Yes. We're gonna get, remember those What Would Jesus Do bracelets? WWJD. I used to have students who wore those. There was a time when they became really popular. I would see the way they were interacting with their peers and thinking, you might ought to look at that bracelet every now and then. And might adjust the way you're treating that other child. Are there good deeds that the world labels evil? I see Mindy nodding her head enthusiastically. Can you think of some? Well, maybe you're thinking, and you don't want to say it out loud. Carol.
Possibly correcting people when they do something wrong. Correct them in love, but do point out that they're doing something wrong.
Give me an example of that.
Well, I can say smoking for one thing, but probably not a good example. But
Do you just go around in public saying, you know, you really should put out that cigarette?
occasionally, not
You do?
often.
I don't think I've ever done that.
Well, mostly relatives and friends or something like
Okay,
that. Say it
okay.
to them.
I see somebody you already have a relationship with. Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. Wendell.
We all like to receive compliments when we've done something good.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a man in Memphis. I considered him a friend. He invited me to deer camp. When I got there, he and some of his friends were there, and the first thing he said to his friends, he's a little bit different, talking about me. And he warned them, I guess. Maybe he warned me, I don't know. But that's one of the best, greatest compliments I've ever received. He's different.
You asked what deeds we do that are disciplining children.
That's a really, that one didn't click for me. That's a great one. Tell us how that's different.
You know, back when, even when I was in school, we got whooped by principals, teachers, coaches. And nowadays, a big thing here, like you can't even touch kids. You can't.
Yeah.
Like we have to stay away from them. Can't tell them no. Parents are always right. Kids are always right. It's tough.
This is my 8th year out of education. And I can't imagine how y'all do it now. I just can't. I didn't well, the last half of my career, I didn't paddle kids either. Didn't usually need to. But, you know, I remember getting paddled once in 3rd grade. I'm going to tell you that story next week. But there were rails on kids' behavior that made it possible to teach and made it possible for kids to learn that have been taken away and make it not impossible, but really getting close to impossible. But did y'all hear what Luke said about the way you deal with kids if you're a teacher? That's different from the way the world maybe does it. There is a war between the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. Wouldn't you agree? There is a war. But to me, an unwillingness to promote things is not intolerance. Taking a stand may look different from one person to another, and we're going to talk about that next week. But ever since Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, there has been a war between the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. One of the things that Daniel Crouch, a few Wednesday nights back from Harding, asked us is what things make us look peculiar to people around us. Wendell just alluded to that. What makes us look different? And I want you to think, what makes me look peculiar to people I interact with? And when Daniel asked that question a few weeks ago, I was troubled by that, because I was thinking, what do people see different about me? Just from natural inherited weirdness.
We all need to really understand there's a big difference between heaven and hell.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big difference.
Wendell said there's a big difference between heaven and hell. I don't think any of us would dispute that, would we? Okay. We're out of time. We didn't get nearly as far as I'd hoped, but thank you very much for your comments, your participation. Hope to see you next week. And ladies, I hope to see you at lunch this afternoon, or right after church.